I decided to take this as an opportunity to present a couple of the projects that I've been working on, probably over the past decade for some other projects, as an example of art tech and art science work and research that's happening in the field. But before I start, since I decided I was not going to necessarily talk about policy, however, I brought a couple of copies of this poster, story map, based upon a workshop that I co-sponsored with the National Endowment for the Arts last September 2010, looking at a gap analysis in terms of how to strengthen art science and art technology programs in academia as well as within the research community. So we'll put them out there someplace after we finish the panel, and it's first come, first serve. And if you don't get one, just ask me and I can send you a PDF. But just wanted to let you be aware of that, and it's a whole nother talk to really talk about that, so I won't be talking about that. So I wanted to talk about a couple of projects that I've been working on. The first one is called Constructs, and as you can see, the model is here, the prototype that you're seeing on the screen up there. Maybe we can turn the lights down a little bit and we can get a better yeah, excellent. All right, so Constructs is a project actually that I started working on when I was a professor at Carnegie Mellon University. This is a later version of the prototype. And the idea was to work around the issues of tangible interfaces, or what some people now call reality-based interfaces, that interact not only with a tangible object, these blocks, but also with a virtual component, which you do not see in this video. So the concept behind these blocks is that as you're building with them, there's a screen, once again, that you don't see because this video was taken before that part of the project was done. I'll show you in the next slide. That actually rebuilds in more or less real time what you're building with these blocks. And what's really interesting, because there is a lineage of electronic construction kits that go back to MIT Media Lab, Jonathan Fraser, others who kind of have worked on this. But what's very unique about this kit is that it's not a basic primitive. The blocks are shaped like pentominoes, so if you're familiar with the tetrominoes, 3 cubes of the same size in various formations. This is like 5 cubes of the same size, which make the shapes, which made for very interesting problems to solve in terms of the software side. So some interesting things in terms of the making of this project. So I started actually, as I mentioned before, at CMU. And I actually worked with students who came from 9 different schools or departments across the campus. And it was very exciting because the research studio was actually my art studio in the School of Art, in the School of Visual Arts. And it was very interesting to have these engineering kids and these architecture kids and drama and human-computer interaction, a few fine art students at the end of the project come to the School of Art to actually work on a project which was actually technically quite sophisticated. And the prototype we did at this stage is not the prototype that you see here, but actually did lead to the development of the block prototype that I have here. And as I mentioned, there is a software component. Maybe later on, if there's some time after the panel is finished, I can kind of fire it up and show it to you, but there's not going to be time right now to actually demo it, given the other things that I want to talk about. But basically what we're doing is that as you're building, each block is actually part of what's called a wireless mesh network. Sort of like Zigbee, if some people have heard that term, meaning that all the devices can talk to each other, send messages back and forth to each other or to a computer, which then reassembles those messages and then rebuilds the construction. So up here we have some very small pictures up here of a construction. So you can imagine there are 2 or 3 or 4 blocks that are put together in the physical realm, and then the actual computer program has to figure out all the translations and to be able to translate that geometry then to the virtual aspect of the project. So that's an example of one of the things. And once again, a lot of collaborators to work on this. This version actually was, I completed with a product design company in Pittsburgh, as well as with a couple of professional software design and engineering companies for various aspects of the technology. But the work that I did do with the students actually really did lead to the work. It was actually quite robust work. We just had to kind of change our direction in some ways on our technology solutions. So moving to another project, a series of projects. This is a series of prints that I call Sui Generis. And just to start off, there's some text on the screen. This work was recently published in the International Journal of African American Art, with a wonderful article by Cinque Hicks called Circuit Jamming. So this is one of his quotes from that article, but I'm actually going to read a little bit slightly something different, not what's on the screen there. So the digitally manipulated images can stand alone as a unique aesthetic investigation. They also serve as a concept pieces for the body of work that will integrate mechatronics. So a lot of this work, and I'll go to the first image here, was started as kind of like thought pieces in terms of thinking about more mechatronic, self-reflective models of myself, my body, notions of self-portraiture, but on the technical side. These actually start to play with some of those tropes, but not necessarily the actual physical computing kind of models I was going to work on with actual electronics, which hasn't actually happened yet. But the result of these prints is actually quite interesting. So I'd like to start this off by saying there's a convex surface in the back of my head. So in this piece, neither nor, the fatty layer of my cranium has been molded into a Boolean nor symbol, inspired by the idiom neither fish nor fowl. I reveal the complexity of what I may or may not be, and I'll leave the arguments open for others to fill. So how did I get this brain imagery? So I actually volunteered at an fMRI demonstration at a conference that was called Science of Consciousness Conference that might still be held. I'm not exactly sure. It was held for quite a few years at Tucson, University of Arizona in Tucson, Arizona. And they asked for volunteers to go in and to have an fMRI study done so they could show the rest of the people how the technology worked. And then, you know, you had to sign your life away to do it. I said, I'll do it as long as I can get the film. And they were a little hesitant because they don't want you to get the film and then to start diagnosing yourself, but everything. But I had to sign away this waiver about, you know, do I have any metals in my body and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, oh my gosh, what am I going in for? But it was actually quite interesting. So the next piece, called Swallow, is also part of this series. Here we can see that Cinque Hicks wrote that the portrait does away with consciousness altogether as a seat of the identity. Instead of the subject is seen as a composition of mechanical forces enmeshed in a network of scientific language, no room is left for even the simulation of consciousness. So this is the piece Swallow. So Swallow, as I mentioned, is a self-portrait that locates the body as a fanciful machine with hints of technological tropes that suggest relational functionality to technology. The body is a fine machine, a perfect machine, that persists regardless of the weak will of the mind. Swallow is based on the X-ray imagery of my swallow test, a visual assessment of my newly sculpted stomach. Shortly after surgery, I was wheeled to the X-ray room and given a barium substance to swallow. I was mesmerized as the liquid snaked through my gastrointestinal system and painted my insides with a chalky white trail. Take the pictures quick. It's not going to stay. It's not going to stay down, I warned to the technicians, of which it didn't. And as I warned the technicians, as my body rejected the alien white substance. So here's a detail.